Morning, welcome to the King's Report News Hour for the 16th year of Chang'e, leap 6th month, and the 23rd day by the heavenly calendar. Tim Elvis sitting in for the second king of Chang'e, Jianjin. And let's get right to our tour around the kingdom this morning. Every morning we take our walk, our constitutional around the kingdom. And right now in Chongqing, Tennessee, it is 66 degrees and clear. 92 is a forecast high today, partly cloudy, warm and humid. A thunderstorm in spots this afternoon. Tonight, mainly clear and humid. 67 for a low. Father's hometown, Cheongju, North Pyongan province in Korea. Partly sunny and 76 right now. Low of 73 tonight, cloudy and humid with rain and a thunderstorm mainly early. And then tomorrow, a high of 83. Little morning rain, otherwise cloudy and humid. And at the Cheongung Palace in Northeast Pennsylvania, we have 67 and mostly sunny right now, getting up to 86 today, humid with more sun than clouds, a shower in spots this morning, followed by a thunderstorm in spots this afternoon. And then tonight, low of 67, a thunderstorm in spots early this evening, otherwise mainly clear and humid. At the Liberty Rock RV Park and Campground in Limestone County, Texas, there's a heat advisory out. We're currently 75 and mostly clear, and getting up to 96 today, sunny to partly cloudy with a thunderstorm in spots this afternoon. Tonight, mainly clear and humid, low of 75. Suncheon Palace in Korea, heat warning here as well. 81 degrees and clear. Right now, getting down to 71 tonight, increasing cloudiness. Tomorrow, mostly cloudy, hot, humid, danger of dehydration, high of 94. At the Gunma Palaces in Japan, got a thunderstorm advisory here, 84 and mostly clear right now, getting down to 74 tonight, partly cloudy and humid. Tomorrow, high of 95, partly sunny, hot, humid, danger of dehydration. At the Ilan, Taiwan property, currently 89 and clear, getting down to 76 tonight, mostly cloudy. Tomorrow, a high of 92, partly sunny, a morning thunderstorm in parts of the area, followed by a brief shower or two in the afternoon. Okay, great. And let's go to Father's Word. Okay. Let's see where we are here. We're in the book on true parents. True parents, or the true parent, depending here on the context. And we're in chapter 8 of that book, and section 1. So section 1 is the three subject, partner, and thought, and parentism. Parentism, right? Yeah, parentism. It says here. Yeah. Right, and then section 1 point. Oh, I'm sorry, section 2. Section 2.3. Let's see here. Okay, so here Father is talking about the location where he chose to give the True Parent Declaration. I believe that happened in 1990, and here he's speaking on July 8th of 1990. You must understand why it is that Reverend Moon suffered. He's referring to himself in the third person here, which he does. And I think in Korean, well, it's not too common, but I think it's understandable. If it were for my country, why would I have suffered so much? I'm an intelligent person. I know I'm a person who understands Korean customs. And this happened because I was trying to live for the sake of the world and live for the sake of the heavenly kingdom. For 40 years, Korea has done all sorts of things. They have sinned. They have sinned. They have committed many sins against me. They have committed many sins against me. I shouldered I shouldered the burdens of my brothers, and I shouldered the burdens of all the parents and all the kinfolk and all the people of Korea who had a relationship with me. And then this time, or recently, I gave them the blessing. That is why I've declared, I've made the declaration of a true parent. And where did I make this declaration? I did not begin it in Moscow. I did not start. Father, he'll do something one place, then he'll sort of spread it around the world. I did not start it in Moscow. I started it in Korea. You must be thankful for that. Speaking to a Korean audience, obviously. Praise God. Yes. All right then. And as I've mentioned, I think Father, prior to 1990, well, he made the True Parent Declaration in 1990. And I think that may answer some people's questions as to why some of his speeches, he seems to be talking as though the true parent is yet to come, or the returning Lord is yet to come, this kind of thing, But as I said, he's letting you figure it out for yourself. He doesn't want anyone to say, well, yeah, I believe in Reverend Moon I believe he's the Messiah because he said so. He's not gonna let you get away with that. You got to figure it out for yourself because he said so. I accepted Father as Messiah. I guess it was the first time that I heard the principle all the way through. The first time I heard the principle, it was kind of a strange situation where I met this Japanese young lady, and she took me to a center, and she was not trained to give the principle. She was very young, and it happened that at that particular time, there were no English-speaking people at the center who could give the principal lecture. And so one of the older sisters, probably an 1800 couple sister, this was in 1974, so someone who would probably, well, no, it couldn't have been 1800 because 1800 couple blessing was until 75. But anyway, someone a little bit older sister gave me the lecture on chapter 1, and it went right over my head. All sorts of lines and circles and squares, and what is going on? Yeah, but then I guess a week or 10 days later, I guess a couple of weeks later, perhaps, I attended a 3-day workshop, and I think that was where everything sort of fell into place for me. And it was this time it was in English. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, I'm sure all of you have your similar testimonies. All right, let's see what happened in Alaska. What happened in Alaska? But before we go to Alaska, since we are focusing on China, let's do this one. Let's do this. Alaska will keep for a few minutes. President Trump says, this is an interesting statement here, Xi Jinping assured him China will not invade Taiwan during his presidency. Okay, so I guess all we have to do now is convince ourselves that Xi Jinping always tells the truth and always keeps his word. We just have to convince ourselves of that. But it is interesting. So what is Xi Jinping saying? Well, anyway, let's first read the story. Okay. President Donald Trump said Chinese leader Xi Jinping promised him that China will refrain from invading Taiwan for the next 4 years. Trump made the remarks during a nearly 30-minute long interview with Fox News' Brett Baier, which was filmed on Air Force One and aired while the president was in Alaska meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. I will never do it as long as you're president. President Xi told me that. And I said, well, I appreciate that, Trump said. The guarantee does not extend to future administrations, the president noted. But he also said, but I am very patient, and China is very patient, Trump said. Say, well, that's up to you, but it better not happen now. It remains unclear when Xi made the remarks. The White House did not respond to requests for comment before publication. And let's see here, just giving a background there. And Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent told CNBC host Andrew Ross Sorkin in March that China will stay out of Taiwan. I follow President Trump's lead, and he is confident that President Xi will not make that move during his presidency, Bessent said. And this was something that Bessent said when? When did he say this? In March. So perhaps it was sometime between the end of January when President Trump was in, or who knows? It could have been before he was inaugurated. It could have been sometime after the election. So we don't know exactly what's going on there. And okay, I think there's nothing else near here. Right. Okay. So anyway, let's think about this for just a minute. Why is so? Let's go ahead and assume, for the sake of argument and discussion, that President Trump is telling us the truth and what he's saying is accurate. So Xi Jinping may be saying, "I'm not going to be ready to invade Taiwan before the end of your presidency." That could be one sort of a message that we could take from this, one meaning that we could take from this. I guess the meaning that President Trump probably wants us to take is that, oh, I'm not going to invade Taiwan before the end of your presidency because I know if I do, you're going to probably bomb my home and kill my wife and children, or something like that. That he's afraid of President Trump. That's what President Trump wants us to think. But I think there are a number of possible backgrounds or possible meanings to this. But what Xi Jinping said about the China being patient. So that's, I am very patient and China is very patient. So that means that Xi Jinping believes that time is on China's side, that China is a rising star, America is a setting star, and the West in general is a setting star. And basically, there's the rising tide of communism, and capitalism is about to be placed on the dustbed of history, dust heap of history. So there is because in communism and Marxism, the historical dialectic, they call it, the historical dialectic dictates that communism will succeed. And so you just have to, sort of wait it out. But Marxism also says that sometimes you have to sort of push things along a bit, right? You can't just wait for things to happen. So they do have a kind of almost a Calvinistic sense of predestination, and perhaps Xi Jinping is thinking in those terms. That's very possible, because he is a dyed-in-the-wool true believer of communism, of Marxist-Leninism, with Chinese characteristics and Xi Jinping thought, of course. They always like to add that. Okay, Chinese characteristics. I don't know what those characteristics are, but that's what they always say. They don't want to just import something from the West. Uh, so I am very patient, and China is very patient. Right. Okay. Well, um, this is, of course, is what Gorbachev believed and Brezhnev believed, and Andropov and Khrushchev and Stalin and all those other folks in Soviet Union believed as well, that the historical dialectic meant that communism was destined to succeed and take over the world. So we'll see. Well, if that is what he's thinking, then that's good. That's good, because that just means that, well, there's no reason for me to push it. There's no reason for me to invade Taiwan and make myself a pariah of the world, because that's what will happen, right? I mean, everybody, at least the West, will turn against China and stop, put all sorts of economic sanctions on China and on Xi Jinping and a lot of other people in China. So, maybe the costs are still greater than the rewards. Maybe Xi Jinping will think that way. So why don't we just wait a little longer, wait for the West to decline further, and then we'll make our move, whether that's 2028 or 2028 or well, I guess President Trump will leave office in January 2029, and so perhaps he said, well, we might as well wait until someone else comes in and see where we are with that new guy. And I guess our concern is that Xi Jinping could be right, at least in some respects. Of course, we don't believe in the historical dialectic, but we are concerned that there is this long-term trend of decline in the West because the West has not connected itself to the returning Lord. And the only way that the West can reverse this trend in the long term is to connect with the second king of China, with Jiang Zemin, and through him with True Father. President Trump is giving us maybe a kind of a 4-year respite at least, but I think Xi Jinping is saying, look, the guy after Trump certainly cannot be as bad for us, for China, as Trump is. He has to be an improvement, because it certainly can't get any worse than this. Can't get any crazier than Trump. So I think that's probably what he's thinking. And so whether state events, or if he's lucky, it could be someone like, I don't know what, Kamala Harris. Yeah. So he's thinking, who knows? It could be a Democrat. It could be Gavin Newsom. Who knows what could happen? We have no idea. So he's just saying, okay, we're gonna sit tight as long as you're in the White House, and then we'll attack after that. So anyway, it's interesting to speculate on what's going on in Xi Jinping's mind. All right. So enough of that. Let's go to Alaska. What happened? What happened? Well, I guess the answer is externally, not much. But I think these things you can't really sort of take a slice of time during the process and make a judgment based on that slice of time. And the media, of course, is always trying to. I mean, really, the U.S. reporters, most of them, 99% of them, wake up in the morning and ask themselves, what can I do today to undermine President Trump? I mean, come on, let's face it, that's what they do. And so they're approaching this from that kind of a perspective. But anyway, let's do our own thinking here and try to look at a couple of stories and see if we can piece together what's actually going on here. And this is the Epoch Times. Key takeaways from Trump-Putin summit in Ukraine. I wish they had used a color other than black here, but anyway. While both sides touted progress, the meeting did not yield a breakthrough to end the war. End the war, period. Trump is set to pass on details to Zelensky and NATO. All right. Okay, then U.S. President Donald Trump and Putin on August 15th met for nearly 3 hours at a military base in Alaska. Originally, I had heard that it was scheduled to go as long as 7 hours. So 3 hours. It started at 11. And I don't know, did they not even break for lunch? So from 11, it didn't even get to 2 o'clock. So I guess they, sounds like they had lunch after they finished. At a military base in Alaska as part of a U.S.-led effort to bring Russia and Ukraine into peace talks. Trump was joined by Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Special Presidential Envoy Steve Witkoff, while Putin was joined by Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, and who had the T-shirt, with actually it didn't say USSR, it said CCCP, which is the same. And Presidential Foreign Affairs Advisor Yuri Ushakov. In a joint press conference after the summit, both leaders described the meeting as productive, but the two sides did not reach a concrete deal. The U.S. president is due to talk with Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky and NATO in the hopes of convening a further meeting to end the war. Here are the key takeaways. No deal until there's a deal, Trump says. At a brief conference after their meeting, both leaders said progress had been made in the talks. They did not provide specifics or take questions from reporters. Trump told reporters that there were, quote, just a very few, unquote, issues to resolve. Some were not that significant, he said, but one is probably the most significant, without providing details. Well, I think we know what that is. It's a NATO membership, Ukraine's NATO membership, I think. That's a pretty good guess, I think. Yes. There's no deal until there's a deal, Trump said. We didn't get there, but we have a very good chance of getting there, he added. The two leaders did not mention a ceasefire or other key elements of negotiations, such as security guarantees for Ukraine, or further U.S. sanctions on Russia and its supporters. When later asked what key points the two sides disagreed on, Trump declined to say. I'd rather not go public with it, Trump told Fox News host Sean Hannity. I guess somebody is going to go public with it. They'll figure it out. Trump also told Fox News that he won't immediately consider more secondary tariffs on buyers of Russian oil, such as China, but it may at a later date. Because of what happened today, I think I don't have to think about that now. I may have to think about it in 2 or 3 weeks, the president said about potential tariffs against China for buying fossil fuels from Russia. The U.S. government recently increased tariffs to 50% for imports from India, one of the major buyers of Russian oil. Ahead of the summit, both leaders stepped out from their presidential aircraft and joined one another on a red carpet on the tarmac at Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson, Alaska's largest military facility. And there's the B-2 bomber flying over as Putin was walking there on the tarmac. As the leaders walked down the red carpet for a chance to take a photo together, a U.S. Air Force B-2 Spirit stealth bomber and 4 F-35 Lightning II stealth fighters conducted a flyover. The two leaders stood on a podium emblazoned with the words Alaska 2025 for a photo op as reporters shouted questions. After one reporter shouted, President Putin, will you stop killing civilians? Putin pointed to his ear and shrugged, suggesting he couldn't hear the question, or maybe didn't understand the question, I guess. I don't know how well he speaks English. Putin then rode together with Trump in the Beast, the U.S. president's heavily armored limousine, to the summit location. So did they bring their own car? Or I guess maybe, I don't know. The meeting marks Putin's first visit to the United States since a United Nations General Assembly meeting in New York in 2015, and his first visit to a NATO country since a working visit to Germany in 2020. Putin highlights security at the post-meeting press conference. Putin said that Russia would continue to seek to eliminate all the primary roots of the conflict in Ukraine and to address fundamental threats to Russian security. And this is what Putin seems to keep coming back to. And so that's why my guess is that the one big issue that President Trump referred to is probably NATO membership. Those two phrases have been used by Putin in Russia's state media throughout the war to refer to Russia's demand that Ukraine be prohibited from joining NATO or other similar international organizations. Just days before launching his full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, Putin delivered an address describing the potential accession of Ukraine to NATO as, quote, a direct threat to the security of Russia, unquote. And as I've said, I think we have to look at this from a Russian perspective, and I think there's, you may say that, well, he's just using that as an excuse. But if you look at the way that the West has treated this issue over the last 30 years, I think he certainly has plenty of condition to say that. Whether he's sincere or not is almost a different matter. Does he have justification, or does he have a foundation to say that about Ukraine joining NATO? And I would say he does. He does, and the West has given him that foundation. And we've already talked about this a number of times. Ukraine has expressed interest in joining NATO, but has never been formally considered for membership. The Russian leader also appeared to make reference to NATO's expansion into Eastern Europe in recent decades, which Moscow says is a threat to Russian sovereignty. All of Russia's legitimate concerns must be taken into account, and a fair balance in the security sphere in Europe and the world as a whole must be restored, Putin said. I guess it's too late to talk about Russia joining NATO. Probably. I think maybe that's probably too late. Yeah, that opportunity, I think, was missed. The Russian leader also said, we agree with President Trump, as he has said today, naturally, that the security of Ukraine should be ensured as well. Okay. And he hopes for warmer ties with the U.S. Putin, during the press conference, described the business his country had lost in recent years and the moderate increase in bilateral trade since Trump returned to office. The Russian leader also described Trump as a good, businesslike, and trustworthy contact. I expect that today's agreement will be the starting point not only for the solution to the Ukrainian issue, but also will help us bring back businesslike and pragmatic relations between Russia and the U.S., Putin said. Putin nevertheless acknowledged that American-Russian relations were at their lowest point since the Cold War, but described Trump's efforts to resolve the war in Ukraine and invitation to Alaska as very neighborly. While both leaders kept mum on the precise nature of their sticking points, Trump said that the direction of the peace process was ultimately up to Ukraine and, to a lesser extent, the rest of Europe. I'm going to start making a few phone calls and tell them what happened, the U.S. president said. Kyiv and most European leaders have yet to comment on the summit, presumably due to the time difference. Well, really? What time is it? Is that true? But come on, I mean, I don't think you can use the time difference as an excuse here. Right now, well, look, right now in London, well, that's it's middle of the night right now. Okay. All right, well, all right, we'll give them a pass. Okay. Some expressed appreciation for Trump's efforts to bring the war in Ukraine to an end while being wary of Putin's statements. I welcome the fact that President Trump is trying to stop the war, that he is continuously talking about it with European representatives, and that he will inform us in Europe about the results of today's meeting, said Czech Foreign Minister on X. But Putin has uttered the same propaganda gibberish about the roots of the conflict that his state television is preaching. The problem is Russian imperialism, not the Ukrainian desire to live freely. So this is who? Czech. Okay, so they have the memory of being basically colonized by the Soviet Empire, and so they're going to look at it very skeptically, and they're going to look at it in terms of Russian imperialism. I think that's probably also historically they have foundation to say that. Trump told Fox News that the next steps would rely on the willingness of Zelensky to participate. European leaders must also get involved a little bit to push towards an agreement, he added. Well, Zelensky is going to talk with Trump, and then as soon as he hangs up the phone, he's going to call Macron, and he's going to call Starmer, and he's going to call Meretz, and he said, "What should I do? What should I do?" And they're going to say, "Fight, fight, fight." That's what they're going to say. So I don't, I don't see Zelensky changing his position here. When asked by Hannity after the meeting what advice he had for Ukraine, Trump's response was straightforward: make a deal. Interesting statement there. Make a deal, right? I think, I wasn't even sharing this with you, was I? Sorry. Go back up to the top. I think European leaders are behind Zelensky, and Zelensky is not going to make a move until he gets some kind of a indication from Europe that they're not going to support him as much as they have been. And I think the European leaders need to have a reality check that if they continue this, we're going to have to be doing it without the, well, at least not without the enthusiastic support of President Trump and of the United States, and that they're going to be shouldering more and more of the burden. And the one unknown is how eager is Zelensky for a deal, but also an unknown is how eager are the European leaders for a deal. Macron seems to be the most hawkish. And something has to be done to allay fears of Russian imperialism. That's for sure. So I think the Czech foreign minister was expressing a belief, justified or not, among many sort of Europeans that if Russia gets away with what they've been doing in Ukraine, then Poland will be next, or the Baltic countries will be next, or the three small countries next to Russia on the Baltic Sea, that they will be next, or something like that, or maybe even Finland will be next, or something. That Putin's desire is to rebuild the Soviet Union, and certainly that T-shirt that Lavrov wore is not helpful. Not helpful. What is he? Is he trying? Was he trying to put a wrench in the works? What an idiot! And he's just giving the Europeans, he's just basically trolling the Europeans, I suppose. Yeah, basically that's what he was doing. He was trolling the Europeans. What an idiot! But an experienced diplomat like that, you got to wonder what was going on. What is the meaning of that? There's some meaning about that, I'm sure. It wasn't an accident that he wore that T-shirt. Well, it's good that Xi Jinping at least has, well, at least as long as we believe him, has said that he's not going to. But listen, later on, Xi Jinping can just say, "Hey, I lied. I lied." This is diplomacy, and we're communists. This is what we do. You can always say that later on, and that's true. That's true. In communism, lying is okay. as long as it furthers the revolution, right? As long as it furthers, of course, in the Chinese context, lying is okay as long as it supports the absolute power of the Chinese Communist Party. Lying is okay. So we do have to take Xi Jinping's comment to President Trump with a few grains of salt, or perhaps even a couple of salt shakers full of salt. All right, but anyway, that's where we are with that right now. Okay, and let's see. I think the Epoch Times story there covered it pretty well. We also have the statement of Putin and everything. But anyway, let's however look at this one other story here on also the Epoch Times. Peace deals, the Trump administration's emerging playbook for conflict resolution. Okay, there's the Armenia and Azerbaijan leaders with the President Trump there. In an era where traditional diplomacy often falters amid endless aid commitments and fleeting ceasefires, a novel approach is taking shape under the Trump administration. What if peace were not merely an idealistic goal, but a structured business model? Imagine resolving decades of conflict by bundling ceasefires with revenue-generating infrastructure, railway that reroute trade, mining rights that fuel reconstruction, or ports that secure long-term leverage. This is the essence of what one could term the corridors for peace. Wait a second. China's going to sue you. China's going to sue you for copyright infringement. Corridors for peace. How's that different from Belt and Road? Corridors for peace. No, you got to come up with something a little more original than that. What one could term, okay, so all right, so this is this guy's version. All right, so that's good. Well, let's try to come up with something a little more original. Corridors for Peace playbook, a strategy the U.S. has already deployed and revealed across 3 continents in recent months. From Ukraine's mineral fields to Central Africa's copper belt and a new transit route in the South Caucasus, these deals publicly emphasize reconciliation while privately reshaping strategic geography to favor American interests, sideline rivals, and transition from aid dependency to self-sustaining economic ties. Interesting. I still remember when Trump met Kim Jong-un. Basically, he promised Kim Jong-un a series of seaside condominium developments, which Kim Jong-un was not very impressed with. But I suppose there are a number of things, a number of projects, economic projects that have been proposed to North Korea. One, of course, is the gas pipeline, natural gas pipeline from Russia through North Korea and into South Korea. And of course, North Korea would be paid for the rights or the right of way that they will be providing. But of course, looking at what Russia has done with their pipelines to Europe, maybe that's not such a good idea now. The pipelines can always be shut off, right? That's a problem. And right now, America wants South Korea to be buying its natural gas. All right, but anyway, maybe something like that can be worked out in the future in Korea. Taken together, these reveal what appeared to be a repeatable playbook. At its core lies a security for economics exchange, halting hostilities in return for access to profit-generating assets. This is coupled with exclusive U.S. oversight or development rights over corridors, funds, or resource sectors, and deliberate supply chain rerouting to diminish the influence of adversaries like Russia, China, and Iran. Now, I wonder if this is coming, or if this is inspired by, or maybe kind of a reaction to China's Belt and Road. China's been doing exactly this kind of thing, although, with the predatory loans involved. Like, for example, China built a railroad in Kenya, right? railroad that was, hey, nice, shiny, expensive, anything like that, which could not pay for itself. Could not pay for itself. So now looks like China may be taking over that asset. Consider the Ukraine-U.S. mineral agreement formalized in April 2025, which establishes a reconstruction investment fund drawing 50% of future royalties from uranium, lithium, rare earth elements, and other critical minerals to finance post-war recovery, with the United States gaining priority access and oversight. In the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda, a June 2025 pact brokered by Washington links troop withdrawals and the end of rebel support to Western investment in cobalt, copper, and lithium supply chains, opening the Great Lakes region to U.S.-backed capital, creating an alternative to China's chokehold. I don't know. You know, Africa is mineral rich, and that has been its blessing and its curse. Places like Nigeria, you know, that are rich in oil, for example, and the Nigerian people are seeing very little of that money. I wonder if, I don't know. We'll have to see how this is done, but I have to approach it with some skepticism. Meanwhile, the August 2025 Armenia-Azerbaijan Accord includes the Trump Route for International Peace and Prosperity, TRIPP, corridor, granting the United States 99-year, there it is, it's the Belt and Road, granting the United States 99-year exclusive development rights over a transit link that bypasses Russian and Iranian routes, committing both nations to territorial respect and non-interference. These initiatives span diverse conflicts, yet adhere to the same architecture, peace tied to profit, with America at the helm. Well, we'll have to see if the U.S. can do a better job of this. When I say better, I mean better for the people in those countries. China's done a very excellent job for themselves, but we'll have to see how this works for the people in those countries. Yeah. Here with America at the helm. Publicly, the narrative is one of triumph and prosperity. Handshakes and ceremonies dominate the optics, with President Donald Trump describing the Armenia-Azerbaijan deal as a historic shift where former foes are going to be friends for a long time. Secretary of State Marco Rubio echoed this, celebrating its potential for regional prosperity. Rwandan Foreign Minister Olivier Longword called the agreement a turning point. For many involved, this framing is genuine, a moral imperative to end the suffering, yet it masks deeper mechanics. Yeah, an imperative to ending suffering. Let's hope so, but I don't know. Beneath the surface, these accords are engineered for strategic depth. They embed U.S. firms in choke points from African rail lines to Caucasian passes, while rerouting trade away from competitors. The funding model pivots from endless aid to self-financing. Mineral royalties and tolls sustain stability, creating incentives that endure only if peace holds. This aligns interests across layers: local revenue for stability, U.S. leverage for supply chain security, deny rivals control of key assets and gain diplomatic leverage, and global demonstration of American deal-making prowess. A fourth crucial layer is durability. Unlike potential volatile aid, these economic engines, according to their proponents, would generate ongoing value, making backsliding costlier for all parties. Let's hope so. Let's hope so. Let's hope so. Let's hope so. Yeah. Successes and limitations. The model's success hinges on pragmatism. It flourishes when leaders prioritize compromise over absolutism, as in the 1978 Camp David Accords, Land for Peace, or the 2020 Abraham Accords, normalizing via trade and tech, bypassing core disputes. Conversely, Ukraine's current impasse gives demand for full territorial return versus Moscow's insistence on neutrality and annexations, illustrates its limits despite the mineral fund's promise. We'll see what happens after the Trump-Putin meeting in Alaska. Past U.S. approaches to grasp the shift compare the corridors for peace model to earlier U.S. playbooks. Under George W. Bush, peace efforts often meant invasions and nation building. Think Iraq and Afghanistan. Well, yeah, that playbook hasn't worked very well at all, has it? With massive troop deployments, trillion-dollar costs, and little linkage between stability and local economic gain. Barack Obama pivoted to diplomacy, sanctions, and multilateral deals like the JCPOA. That's the thing with Iran. Trading sanctions, relief for compliance, and also pallet loads of cash, plane loads of cash, but without U.S. economic stake or to anchor outcomes, leaving agreements vulnerable to political change. Joe Biden followed with coalition-driven aid and sanctions, as in Ukraine, channeling billions without self-financing mechanisms to make peace profitable for all sides. Even Bill Clinton's Dayton Accords used NATO enforcement and institutional reforms, but no revenue-producing assets to lock in stability. The new approach flips it, broker deals where peace pays through shared profits, U.S. oversight, and rival sidelining. It's pragmatic, cost-conscious, and interest-driven, though critics warn it may sacrifice deeper governance reforms for shorter-term wins. Well, deeper governance reforms, that's going to have to be up to the people in those countries. You can't, you can't just sort of transplant democracy everywhere you want to put it. U.S. strategy stands apart from that of its competitors. China's Belt and Road emphasizes unrecoverable loans for influence, fostering dependency but vulnerable to leverage shifts evident in Beijing's $3 billion annual aid, contrasting with meager domestic flood relief. Russia freezes conflicts via peacekeepers for control, lacking economic anchors. The EU dangled to European nations accession incentives tied to reforms. The UN monitors ceasefires without revenue mechanisms. The American edge lies in transparency, explicit enforceable trades where peace yields profit, rewarding collaboration with predictability, unlike rivals' opaque or coercive tactics. All right, well, sounds good, sounds good. Domestically, debate rages across ideologies. Proponents hailed it as efficient, ending wars without troops, slashing aid, and countering rivals. Critics decry it as veiled imperialism, risking sovereignty and making human rights trade-offs. Congolese Nobel laureate Denis Mukwege termed the DRC deal a scandalous surrender. This tension reflects broader questions. Is transactional peace sustainable or a perilous precedent? We'll have to see, right? We'll have to see. Upon examining the Ukraine Mineral Agreement, the Rwanda-DRC framework, and the Armenia-Azerbaijan corridor, one may notice that they all hinge on the convergence of 6 distinct conditions. One could use it as a diagnostic tool to evaluate the potential applicability of the corridors for peace model in other conflict zones, identifying both opportunities for success and risks of failure. First, as transactional actors, both sides must be willing to trade concessions for concrete gains. When leaders cling to maximalist demands, such as in Ukraine, there's no room for compromise. Strategic asset, a port, corridor, or resource that generates steady revenue. This economic anchor is what makes peace self-reinforcing. 3, enforceable U.S. role. The United States must have the ability to oversee or secure the deal's economic component so that compliance brings tangible rewards. 4, rival displacement. The agreement should push out a competitor, whether China's Belt and Road, Russia's regional influence, or Iran's trade access. And 5, conditional buy-in. Allies investing alongside the United States spread the risk and strengthen commitment. And 6, domestic political payoff. A win voters can see jobs, trade, or revenue streams that sustains support at home. When these filters are applied to the global landscape, potential hotspots might begin to emerge. Well, let's see. In Korea or Taiwan. Here you have the right maximalist demands in Taiwan. Xi Jinping is pretty maximalist in terms of his demands there, so probably not. Already on number one, you're stumbling there. So I don't think this is going to work in Taiwan. How about Korea? Well, maybe a little bit more possibility in Korea, potentially. Yeah, like I said, the natural gas pipeline has been discussed before, and of course the Kaesong Industrial Park, I think, had this kind of a idea behind it. The Kaesong Industrial Park was an industrial park that was set up just across the military demarcation line, and it was a sort of a special area where South Korean companies would invest, and they would invest and they would build sort of factories, and they would hire North Koreans, and North Koreans would work and they would get paid by the South Koreans. Well, okay, the pay part, maybe, I don't know. But anyway, but the idea though was that this is a sort of a joint economic thing. But it got shut down by the North Koreans. And in fact, they even put some sticks of dynamite in there and blew the whole thing up just to make their point. So I think it was good while it lasted. It served its purpose while it lasted, I suppose. It did sort of ease tensions while it lasted until the guy with the dynamite came along. It was little sister Kim Yo Jong who I think apparently was responsible for blowing the thing up. Anyway, what's her conclusion here? In conclusion, this playbook isn't infallible. It's just one tool thriving on aligned incentives, faltering amid intransigence. Yet in a world of shifting alliances and rising competitions, the United States is betting that it can still make the peace table a place where both sides win and where America wins just a little more. Whether that bet pays off depends not just on the skill of the deal makers, but perhaps also on how long the economic glue can hold before rivals try to pry it apart. Well, that's kind of what happened in Kaesong, right? The rivals managed to pry it apart. Yeah, well, what happened in Kaesong, I think, was that the North Korean workers who were working there were getting too South Koreanized, and in fact, that's where, I don't know if you're familiar with the chocolpie. The chocolpie is it's a pastry, I guess you call it, about that big, and it's covered in chocolate, and inside you have a sort of a cake type thing, and then I think maybe a little bit of cream filling or something like that, and it's been a popular snack in Korea for many years. I remember, I think even in the 80s, perhaps even going back to the 70s. So anyway, somehow these chocolpie got introduced into the Kaesong situation, and they were a big hit among the North Koreans. And in fact, chocolpie kind of became a sort of money among North Koreans. They were using chocolpie as money, as I understand. And I think the North Koreans saw what was happening and say, wait a second, this isn't Marxism. No, Marx never talked about this. And so they decided to put it into it. So what we see in the President Trump doing these things so far, there isn't that ideological divide, right, between you know, let's see, he's talking about DRC and Rwanda, right? So there's no ideological divide there. And Azerbaijan and Armenia, there's no ideological divide there. They're both communist, or at least they come from communist backgrounds. And what was the other one that he was talking about? Um, uh, uh, yeah. So anyway, this he has President Trump has not yet been able to apply this to a communist, non-communist situation. I think that may be this test. And of course, the Middle East, Gaza, is it going to work in Gaza? Mhm. I don't know. Maybe there's possibility there. It depends on who you're dealing with. Not as long as Hamas is in charge. That's true. Um, Time will reveal whether this approach reshapes the global order for good, or now it signals a shift in U.S. diplomacy, one where peace is tied to economic dividends. Well, we'll see. We'll see. We'll see. But, of course, father's solution, I've talked about many times, is so that you have intercultural and interreligious blessings. And Father many times talked about how the children that come from those blessings are going to love both the culture of their mother and of the culture of their father. We hope. But well, anyway, this is certainly worth trying, and if it works, then President Trump will surely be the greatest president in U.S. history. All this, this Nobel Peace Prize stuff, I think I don't really take much. I don't really put a whole lot of stock in that. The Nobel Peace Prize, for one thing, has really uh, lost its credibility because they've been giving it to so many leftists. And I mean, they gave the Peace Prize to Obama before he did a single thing. All he did was get elected. Oh, yeah, the first black president. Let's give him a Peace Prize. But Obama was about everything but peace, and he did not do a good job of bringing peace in the world. So Nobel Peace Prize. I hope, I'd like to encourage President Trump to just forget about the Nobel Peace Prize. All right, let's see here. We've got a couple of minutes. Is there anything else happening in the world? Next week we're going to have to get back to the rest of the world. Here we have Reuters: world leaders react to Trump-Putin summit reaching no deal in Ukraine. Well, like I say, it's a slice in time. Slice in time. Okay, at least President Trump is still working on it. Okay. What else do we have going on here? Hmm? Okay. Let's take a look at Breitbart, see what they're doing. Okay. Let's take a look at this. Trump, okay, so they're focusing on Alaska as well. And Putin echoes POTUS, the Ukraine war would not have started if Trump were president. Yeah, he did say that, too. Okay. Schiff concerned about how easily Trump could be manipulated by Putin. Yeah, Schiff, that guy. He may end up in jail pretty soon. Residents of Northwest DC are annoyed by Trump's crime crackdown. Yeah. Okay, I don't think there's a whole lot we can look at there. Let's try something else. Let's look at where's Newsmax? It's time already. Let's just look at the top headline in Newsmax. Zelensky to meet Trump in D.C. Monday after no deal on ceasefire. Okay, but that's a new story. Okay, we'll meet Donald Trump on Monday after. Okay, Trump. Okay, right. Okay, good. So things are still going, still moving along. Okay, all right, gotta go. Thank you for joining us today, and I will see you Monday, and we will see what the next week brings. Yeah. So the end of next week, we're having a Holy Day celebration, and always there's always a push, sort of things start getting really intense leading up to holy days, and so perhaps some important breakthroughs will happen next week as we go towards the holy day, which will happen on Saturday. Yeah. Normally we do the 7178 ceremony, Joel on the 7/8 day, but this year the king has chosen to do it on the 7/1 day, which is next Saturday, a week from today. All right. God bless, Godspeed. May his kingdom come quickly.